Welcome to Up Your Nerd Cred. Did you used to know everything that was happening in the Marvel and DC universes? Did finding out that some superheroes are from Marvel and some are from DC blow your mind? Has keeping track of everything that's happening there, and then realizing that we're only talking about the comics universes and not the cinematic ones, and that all these different universes with their own multiversal crises have all gotten a little bit out of hand? Well, don't worry. Up Your Nerd Cred is here to talk about the gods cosplaying as men, the men cosplaying as gods, and how much the cinematic universes are really leaving out. At the end of each episode, you'll hopefully know a little bit more than you did and can up your nerd cred. I will say that I've got the mouse ears, that I only wear the symbols of incredibly powerful women who can destroy the universe. My other pair is Sailor Moon.
And her name is Cece, and I am A.M. Diaz, and I am burdened with glorious purpose of being a colossal nerd. And nerd! Yes, exactly. And we are here to continue part 2 of our deep dive into the amazing women of Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel.
There's so many people who are covering this thing. So this is the second part of the episode where, again, you can go and find the other part where we're on the couch together. If we're not on the couch together, it's not at the beginning of this episode.
Oh yeah, we have returned for part 2 together still.
Teamwork makes the dream work. So, but while we're sitting there talking about like the, two-parter of it all, it's very important that we do not forget our format, okay? Because it is very important that listeners, you're nerding out about all kinds of things, right? It's not just heroes. It's not just villains, all right? Book talk is being ridiculous. Entirety of the political system is absurd. What are we actually nerding out about? So what am I nerding out about? All right, I finally actually sat down and watched K-pop Demon Hunters.
You've been trying to get her to do this for ages.
It's very cute. It was a lot of fun.
It's cute.
And
it's a cultural phenomenon.
There, I saw so many people on Threads and TikTok sitting there dealing with like, I gotta prep these long behind purple braids for Halloween for my child because all these kids want to be that girl. And I'm like, that's cute. But
not
like,
just all their kids. It's like the number of men wearing Rumi cosplay in West Hollywood during Halloween.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds right. I will say that I also saw a few people who were just like, I'm super psyched to already be Korean, so it's very easy for me to just go ahead and make a costume that everybody will understand. Although I have to say, the lady with the bad attitude who had like her like incognito attitude, she had the long red hair, cranky attitude lady.
Oh, I'm blanking on her name.
Exactly.
It's like no, it's Rumi, Zoe,
Mira.
Thank you.
Excellent. So what was it we were saying before?
So we were talking about like people dressing up for the K-pop Demon Hunters.
Oh yeah, okay. So K-pop Demon Hunters, it is very cute. I've seen so many people with the like hair braid thing going on,
and the music is amazing.
I don't understand why everybody is so into Golden when like this is what it sounds like is there. It's right there.
No, I get it. I prefer this is what it sounds like myself because I love all the songs, but Golden, unfortunately, is more marketable, and it's also the whole, like, we're badass, we're strong women, while the other one's more retro, you're more thinking about, like, who you are as a person, so.
Well, to be fair, I am an old, like, as far as, like, the demographics are concerned, like, the demographics that matter concerned, so me being interested in the reflective song makes more sense than the youngs that this was, like, aimed at, who are hyped for the, like, we're going up, 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 and that's as much as I'm going to do because I don't want to.
Are you afraid that Sony's going to come after us, too?
I'd like to not irritate anybody. Anyway, what are you nerding out about?
Well, I am nerding out about the fact that we are now entering into season 2 of Has Been Hotel. So, as many of you know, Has Been Hotel started off as a series of animated shorts on YouTube in association with the Hell of a Boss series. Mm-hmm. The creator, Vizipop, she's been doing animation stuff for years, and both of her series have been picked up by Amazon Prime. So that means bigger budget. And yeah, it's like we've entered into the second season of Has Been Hotel, which for those of you who may not have seen it yet, I recommend watching it. It's about a hotel in hell being run by Lucifer Morningstar's daughter, Charlie, and her belief that sinners could be redeemed and allowed entry into heaven.
What is this, The Good Place?
Yeah, but there's no trickery about it. She's very upfront about it. Unfortunately, all the people that she's trying to redeem are in some ways very irredeemable. So it's a fun journey and great. Like Vizzy Pop is very much into musicals, so it's a musical series. Great songs, fun characters. And yeah, they've just started their second season on Amazon Prime, and I highly recommend it. And also the Has Been Hotel series. It's also been very fun. Which
Well,
takes place in the exact same story. So, Has Been Hotel, Charlie Morningstar, a hell of a boss, follows a few imps in the Pride Ring of Hell who have decided to start their own assassination business for sinners who want to get revenge on the people who killed them or whatnot. But it's also a, story about redemption, mental health, and learning how to forgive yourself.
I just want to point out the fact that when I tried to get him to watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, he was uninterested for whatever reason. Anyway,
It was not that I was uninterested, it was that I was not available to watch it. I was not.
that's his story and he's sticking to it.
I was working until like 1 in the morning. Last thing I wanted to do was watch TV.
Anyway, we're going to go argue about this in the sidelines, and we'll be right back to Up Your Nerd Cred. Welcome back. So, we're on the second part of our two-part deep dive into the various women who have worn the Captain or Miss Marvel moniker. So, as we were ending the previous episode, we were talking a little bit about the character of Monica Rambeau. She had lost and regained her powers in the 90s, and she had and also in that time frame, she's had a few different code names going on in part.
And been a part of several different teams.
Yeah, in part because, there's a lot that's going on and a lot that's changing, and it kind of makes sense that if you are not having the same powers, did she have the same power set whenever she would regain them, or was stuff shifted a bit?
Generally, she's had similar powers or the same powers. It's I don't think she's had anything drastically different like they've done with some other characters, like, I don't know, Power Girl, where she went from having all the Superman powers to suddenly having weird dream powers recently.
Well, they can't all be winners. So she was able to keep. So then why did she change her name multiple times then?
Well, in story, they were just kind of she felt like she needed to reinvent herself or something like that. But out of story, it was, as we mentioned in the previous episode, largely just because of the fact they had other Captain Marvels popping up. They introduced Captain Marvel, who was the son of Marvel and half-brother of Hulkling, the King of Space.
Wait, Wiccan's?
Yeah, Hulkling's husband, Wiccan's husband.
Wiccan's husband's brother?
Yeah, his half-brother.
Half-brother.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, because all the superheroes are having multiple kids. And yeah, so there's him, and then there was also Marvel Boy, who was a member of the Young Avengers, and he also kind of went by Captain Marvel as well. So, and he also hooked up with Hercules, of all people.
Also,
Very May December romance there.
If we're gonna sit there and get into it, though, of course, Jean Grey was Marvel Girl for a while.
Yep, I mean, the original Marvel hero was Miss Jean Grey of the X-Men, and she actually returned to the Marvel Girl moniker during the Krakoa era, which always felt like a weird step back just because the moniker and costume she wore was very much a,
product of its time?
Well, not even that. It was just it was the look and name of a teenager. It didn't really fit somebody who was in her probably mid-30s by now.
Oh, so it's kind of like that one quote from Sex and the City. It was if you were 22, this would be cute, but you're 35 and now you look stupid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's when they finally changed her costume after the Hellfire Gala, everyone was just oh, thank God.
I mean,
At least call her Marvel Woman, Anyways,
situation.
Jean Grey was Marvel Girl at one point.
Yeah, so it's a little bit weird to have her changing her name so much, though.
Honestly, not really. It's there's characters who change their names every other week. Kitty Pryde, she changed her name from Sprite to Ariel to Shadowcat, back to Kitty Pryde to Shadowcat again, and then there's Tim Drake, who's gone from Robin to Red Robin to Drake, back to Robin.
Look, I'm just saying, some of these people change their names more than Sean Combs did.
Yeah. But for Monica, focusing back on Monica, largely the reason was because she was, as great of a character as she was not super popular. Part of it was because Marvel didn't really know how to market her as her own character. Part of it was, unfortunately, the sexism and racism of people not wanting to follow a powerful black woman.
They're not really doing a good job of making sure the marketing is getting people hyped like, to getting people curious against their own, like, kind of thing,
Yeah.
which, continues to be a problem that is not just Kevin. It's the entirety of like, honestly, the Hollywood machine. So
But and it's just like they kept renaming her because they kept wanting to continue to use the Captain Marvel moniker, but they didn't want to continue with her being the Captain Marvel. So they introduced all these other variations. One of my friends does a amazing Marvel costume with the black and blue face paint and all that.
mhm.
But even he didn't. He's very niche. A lot of people don't recognize him. And it wasn't until Carol came along and took over the moniker, which does kind of say something to the fact that it's like the white woman got the name and has become the household name.
Again, I do not know who is sitting here trying to make, like, Marvel, like, political. Who is doing that?
No,
I
I
don't
don't know. I
know.
don't know.
Anyway,
But at
but
least
so
Monica, Monica has continued because as well, she has not become a mainstream name like Carol has. She is still a very popular character with a strong fan base.
and she does have, multiple or multiple, like, MCU properties under her belt too.
Yeah, I mean, she has made the progress from page to screen, which a lot of characters have not. I mean, all those male Captain Marvels that I mentioned earlier, not a single one of them have appeared or even been name dropped.
That's fine.
Yeah. But Monica, she got her appearance in first Captain Marvel as a child.
With Maria, Rambeau having the photon, call signs,
Yep.
I get why she would take that one.
Yeah, so we got baby Monica in that series, and she was fun, precocious. She had a great relationship with Carol. And then we jumped into WandaVision, where she is now an adult. Carol's been missing since the 80s and
No, it was the 90s.
90s? I
Yeah.
thought it was the 80s.
No, it was the 90s.
Okay,
'Cause
90s.
yeah, because she crashed into, like, the Blockbuster and
Oh, you're
everything.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, she hasn't been missing since the 90s, but this is also the situation where she had been sitting by her mom's bedside.
And then,
Snap.
yep.
Mm.
And unfortunately, Monica got wiped, and her mother sadly passed away, without her daughter. But I believe Carol came back during that time and spent time with her before she passed.
Carol did come back, but the problem is that, like, nobody, like, and again, this is still, like, in the MCU, but, like, Maria at no point told Monica that Carol had come back, and it's
Well, she
because
couldn't because she was already passed away by the time Monica got brought back after the Avengers.
that's fair.
Yeah, what movie was it?
Uh,
Avengers
Endgame?
Endgame. Thank you. Avengers. Again, alcohol has been flowing.
Alcohol has been flowing, and also, realistically speaking, we were in the theater when Cap said Avengers Assemble, like, we were there opening night, not together, unfortunately, but we were there opening night, and if you need to go have a good cry, go look up, Cap saying Avengers Assemble in Endgame. Having said that, we are going to move it a little further, though,
Oh,
into go
well,
ahead.
we want to finish up Monica's stuff with the MCU.
Yeah, I was say, like, we wanna move further into,
Yeah.
like, making sure that we're covering,
Yeah.
like, what it is that she's
So,
doing, so
Monica got brought back after the events of Endgame, and we got to see that during WandaVision, where we got introduced to Agent Monica Rambeau as an agent of S.W.O.R.D.
this is not the shield, it's sword. So one's
Yeah.
outer space, one is, like, more terrestrial
Yeah.
based.
And unfortunately, S.H.I.E.L.D., I believe, still remains disbanded to this point. Officially, we had the unofficial one during the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series continue, but that kind of got wiped from continuity. So I
I'm
don't
sh
know if there's any legitimacy to that one anymore.
I'm sure there's a universe where it technically still counts.
Yeah, but yeah, Monica, we got a flashback to her coming back, and her mother was long since passed away. Carol, as far as she knows, never came back, and Monica's trying to rebuild her life and is very much traumatized by this, especially by the fact she was abandoned by somebody she cared about.
Although, I will say, and I realize that, it's not one of the things that the MCU is, like, really going for is a lot of, like, realism and things like that. But technically speaking, the Voyager probe has been traveling for 70 odd years and has not left the solar system.
Yeah, and
So
eventually it'll come back as some weird alien tech that Captain Kirk will have to fight against.
yeah, or try to put his anyway, what I'm saying
He didn't try to
is
fight. No, he didn't do that. That command or second in command tried to do that.
no, that was Picard's second in command.
No. It was Kirk's because in Star Trek the
This
movie,
is there's a reason why.
yeah, the dad from Seventh Heaven, he fucked the bald girl in the Star Trek movie.
So,
How much of this is going to end up in the episode?
There's a lot of it that's getting cut. It's fine because it's going to actually be really great for the part where we're going to introduce the Patreon
Honestly, we
in
need to have
this.
like just episodes where it's just us getting drunk and trying to talk. That'll be the Patreon special.
That's gonna be a Patreon tier.
All right, so back to Monica.
Yeah, so
All right,
yeah,
so
that's definitely going in
yeah.
like the Patreon special cut.
But we got to see Monica, after her mother passed and her trying to rebuild her life as an agent of S.W.O.R.D., which led to her to going to the Westview location during Wanda's, let's say, escape from reality.
I will say that this woman was grieving, and she clearly did not know what it is that she was doing. It was not her fault.
Well, she kind of knew what she was doing.
Okay, but
She didn't know what she was doing with her powers, but she was still
I'm just saying, like,
dance puppet stand.
as a fellow magic user, I feel like you can appreciate that sometimes you don't always know all of the ramifications of everything that you're doing, but that's
Oh no, Loki! As Loki, I know the ramifications. I just don't care.
okay. Well, that's fine. Team Nexus beings over here.
But so she comes in during the Wanda Westview incident and ends up being pulled into Wanda's melodrama. Literally, when she walks in, suddenly gets her memory erased and becomes a cast member of the incident.
Although I will say that I think the reason that she threw herself into it so much is because she's not necessarily having a death wish, but I don't think that she was as concerned about herself as she should have been. And I think there's a certain amount of her grief that she has absolutely refused to deal with in WandaVision and further in her next showing in The Marvels.
I mean, I'm not completely disagreeing, but I don't feel like she had a death wish. I felt more like she was throwing herself into her career because she had nothing else going on for her life. She had no
Yeah.
mother. She had no, as far as we know, friends.
Yeah,
And
not
like,
necessarily a death wish, but one of those things where she's just like, I'm going to go ahead and do this because, like,
yeah, but she also did get like her memories and all that stuff, and it wasn't until Wanda basically provoked a recollection of what's really happening.
didn't Darcy say though that going back in the hex could kill her though?
It was later though.
I'm just saying, like, it's
Yeah.
not like I'm not
But
technically wrong.
eventually, Monica realized, oh, right, this isn't the reality we're supposed to be in. Wanda had a freak out because she's like, you don't belong here, threw her out, and bing, bang, boom, suddenly Monica's got new powers.
Well, no, Monica didn't get her new powers
Until Wanda threw her out.
No, Wanda threw her out, but it wasn't until she came back in that she actually.
Well, no, it's like the powers had already started to manifest.
It started to impact her DNA, but she wasn't able to actually do anything with it until after she.
Well, yeah, because it's like when she got through there, she was changed.
I think that
because we saw her powers light her face and her eyes when she got thrown out.
Okay, you know what? What I will say is that it is very cool to talk about Monica Rambeau in WandaVision, but it's also worth pointing out that she was really struggling in the Marvels, where we actually have our three ladies of the hour, being together on screen for the first time.
It's like because Monica at that point is an agent working with Nick Fury, and she ends up finding herself tied into one person who is not her favorite person in the world at that point, and another one who could become one of her favorite people.
I mean, the Kamala Khan, who we are speaking of as our extra Miss Marvel.
We might need to wrap back down to Monica, considering we have reached the Kamala Khan part of our.
So Kamala Khan is who is the extra Miss Marvel that we have in this. So we have all three of our Marvels together. Now, Kamala her first appearance was in Captain Marvel number 14 in 2013. And then her first solo run was in 2014. And she was created by G. Willow Wilson, Adrian Alphona, and Sana Amat. And this very cool teenager has a lot of energy and excitement about, Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel.
Kamala is literally the fans. She is the ultimate fangirl. She has a hyperfixation on Carol Danvers, but not just Carol, but all the superheroes. She writes fan fiction. She makes cosplay. She does, has toys about her favorite heroes. So she is literally the fans, but not the toxic fans like Superboy Prime over in DC. Instead, she is the, the earnest fan, the one who really takes these characters and these stories to heart and believes in the best of everything.
She's the fan who actually makes it kind of worth it to have a sort of comic background history and stuff because, like, somebody who's interested and excited about it is going to be able to, like, really feel it a lot more. Like, and again, this is why I said that Iman Vellani, perfect casting. She's like,
She herself is a fangirl. She is one of those people who loves these characters so much and was so excited to play these. And she would actually argue with Kevin Feige, of all people, about what they did in the comics versus what he was trying to do in the movies.
I contend that you could probably tell most of these scriptwriters how they've gotten things incorrect, but
Yeah, but I feel like, the actress would be a lot more efficient at that because she's so damn sweet and adorable.
I know she's so
Yeah.
like she's just so excited to see it, and like Iman Vellani is like portraying Kamala Khan as this character really is, and so like, but she's like meeting Monica and is very slightly kind of actively irritating because she's really excited about everything.
She's so earnest. But before we get too much into Marvels, let's get back into
Well,
who Miss Marvel is as a character.
yeah.
So we've talked about the fangirl part, but also what made her such an interesting character at the time, especially considering, this was granted like over a decade past the events of 9/11, but she was introduced as a Middle Eastern character. She's a Pakistani American teen from Jersey City. Her parents are very practicing Muslims.
In fact, in the TV show that we saw, her brother was getting married to
Yep.
a nice Muslim girl.
Yeah, and that was a big deal because there's very little Muslim representation in superheroes. I mean, the closest I could think of was Sabah from she's kind of an Avenger, but not really. She appeared in the Captain America. So we don't really have a lot of Muslim superheroes in comics,
Or really represented
Exactly.
positively at all.
Because you really look at comics, and the vast majority are white cis characters, and then you have we have a better number of people of color these days than we had like back in the Silver Age. But
Representation exists, but we're not necessarily quite there.
yeah, because it's like I'm trying to
Progress.
think of Muslim characters, and closest I can think of right now is Dust from the X-Men. She was a Muslim superhero introduced during the new X-Men run by Grant Morrison. And she has been a very popular character. Her and Kamala Khan have actually been part of the champions in the comics.
Nice.
But again, it's very rare. So a lot of people were really excited about seeing this kind of representation.
Yeah.
And it was one of those that made her story so interesting was the fact that we actually delved into her faith and all that stuff. It wasn't just like she's Muslim, but we never see her practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, no, we saw that her parents, they went to their,
Mosque.
their mosque regularly. And they would, prayer, and the father was very traditional and had very, like, specific opinions about what his daughter should be able to do.
Also, I want to shout out the way that, again, I know this isn't the show, but the way that the imam of their mosque was just like, hey, you can't come in here and just like trample all over our like space.
Topical.
What?
Yeah,
Are-
topical?
No, no, of course
No.
there are no
Never.
jackbooted thugs trying to come in.
No, not in this day and age.
That's-
Not at all.
Who said Marvel is political?
I don't know. It's like all these people thinking it's woke. Oh my god.
Anyway, so we have this child though. So how is it though that she comes from being just like a general like fangirl to being Miss Marvel? Like, she don't just
As I mentioned earlier in the previous episode, there was the period where Marvel did not have the rights to the X-Men.
right.
So they decided they were going to start pushing the X-Men aside because they were owned by Fox. And they were going to try to make the Inhumans the next X-Men. Problem was, the Inhumans was a very limiting kind of narrative because the main Inhumans were royalty from a class system where they ruled over lesser members of their race and society.
Also, realistically speaking, it's going to be very difficult to effectively humanize a group called the Inhumans.
I mean, they do it a lot. Like, Miss Marvel and Quake are very much, but
Oh no.
the royal family kind of like, that's the problem there. It's like the royal family is not relatable. But during that period, they decided that they were going to essentially Black Bolt, the king of the Inhumans, released the Terrigen mist bomb over the earth. And Terrigen Mist is how Inhumans activate their powers. It causes a genetic change, and they suddenly develop different superpowers at random. And the problem during this period was the Terrigen Mist was activating in humans but killing mutants because apparently it was poisonous to the mutants. And while the Terrigen Mist was moving around the Earth, Kamala was exposed to it, and this caused her to have a psychedelic trip where she saw a ghostly Carol Danvers.
That's
Yeah.
that seems like,
Well, she was excited. She's like, "Oh my god, you're my favorite character!" But it ended up activating her power, which was what she calls embiggening.
I mean,
And
it's a way of describing it.
yeah, so essentially, she's a polymorph similar to Mr. Fantastic. She's able to stretch, change, grow her size, and all that stuff. She's able to change her face and like take on different forms, that sort of thing.
Polymorph is more than just turning your enemies into sheep.
Yes. So she was given these powers, and she started working as the hero of Jersey. She would, solve local crimes, very Spider-Man-y back in his early days.
Honestly, I'm here for it because Queens needed a neighborhood superhero. Hell's Kitchen had a
Mhm.
neighborhood superhero. Why can't Jersey City have a neighborhood superhero?
And, if it was fun, her solo series was so fun because it's one of those where, people are trying to treat her like, oh my god, she's a threat, but she's such a sweet girl that no one can really believe that she is a threat at all.
I mean, yeah.
But as time progressed, Kamala ended up becoming a bigger hero in the greater universe. She actually met Carol Danvers, and they developed I would almost say big sister, little sister, mentor mentee sort of thing,
I
but not.
mean, they aggressively made that kind of thing
Yeah,
happen in the movie and such. Cause
yeah. But the thing was, in the comics, it was very much like modern sidekicks, where yes, we have like Batman and Robin, but most of the time Robin works solo. Same thing was happening with Kamala. She was very much like she would be able to call Carol for advice, but for the most part, she was working as her own hero. Yeah. And eventually, she started to expand into the greater universe. In her solo series, she met a number of different heroes. And she fangirled about every one of them. Like, there's one point where she met Wolverine of the X-Men, and she's telling him about her Storm Wolverine fanfic and how it got like really high ratings on their equivalent of
Archive by my own.
fanfiction.net or whatever current fanfic website exists.
You could not get that out of me with wild horses.
Oh no, she was happy to share that stuff.
There's many. I can tell. I can do many weird things like celebrities when I'm excited. Okay, I am concerned about the prospect of meeting people that I follow on Threads.
Hmm.
Um,
But yeah, it's like her solo series was fantastic, and it's like it spoke to so many different people of Muslim faith, teenagers, people who are just like from a different culture than what's considered mainstream, and
it's also that we're far enough away from 9/11 that a lot of people who have had a lot of this in their main, like, as they've grown up, because it's been like 15 years of just like these Muslim terrorists
Yeah, but
that
that was still kind of a subplot in her solo series
yeah.
because people still treated the fact that she was Muslim like it was a threat sometimes, and that was a bad thing. And she was trying to break people of those beliefs and stuff. And as time progressed, she became a bigger part of the Marvel universe, as I said, and that led to her not joining, creating the new one of the latest generations of champions.
Oh yes, with Miles Morales and Nova and
No, and yeah, and Teenage Cyclops from the time traveling X-Men storyline that we spoke about before,
yeah.
and the Ryan Choi Hulk,
Mhm.
and Vivian Vision, the daughter of the Vision.
Hey gang, editing Cece here. I just wanted to give you a quick clarification. I know that we said that it was Ryan Choi Hulk. It is actually Amadeus Cho, who is the totally awesome Hulk. Accidents happen, especially when there's margaritas involved. Make sure you watch the Patreon version if you want to see how much margarita was happening.
So she created this entire team that was honestly one of the best books. I'm still disappointed that it got canceled a couple of times, actually.
Okay, well, when did it get canceled though? Like, when was it running?
I mean, it was running about like 2016, I think.
Okay,
2016 to 2020 something.
that sounds right.
But yeah, and it was like this really great story because it very much reminded me of one of my favorite DC runs, Young Justice during the 90s.
Oh my god.
Yeah, where it followed like a group of kid heroes who were just trying to do what was right in the world. And it was very much like the idea of like the Gen Z generation who are fighting for progress and change. And people would say this was a very woke series.
So the Young Avengers that they were, like, kind of teasing at the end of, like, Hawkeye and stuff like
Was
that.
very much well, it was originally it was more planned to be like the Young Avengers from the comics, which was
Mhm,
like Hulkling, Wiccan, Patriot, Stature, and stuff like that.
mhm.
But these days, it sounds like they're progressing more towards the champions, with Miss Marvel and Hawkeye, and some of them being more like more Kamala's team. And yeah, so they're going for that sort of thing. But it was a very great story. It was one of those where Cyclops from the X-Men is one of those characters who he was always the leader of the X-Men, and he always had to be in charge and serious. But when he joined the Champions, he was not the leader. Kamala was.
Good.
Yeah, she was the one who created the team. She was the one everybody trusted to follow. And one thing that it's like was really sweet was Cyclops didn't have to be in charge. He was allowed to be a kid. And it was very hard for him. He didn't know how to be a child. But Kamala made him feel like he was part of a friend group. They would watch movies, they would hang out, they would play video games. And he considered her his best friend.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like teenage Cyclops saw her as his best friend, the one person outside of the X-Men who knew him best. And after teenage Cyclops had to go back to the past and go and grow up and stuff like that,
Of the long way.
years later, Kamala and Cyclops would be reunited. Adult Cyclops and still teenage Kamala, she's just like, "Oh, Mr. Summers, I don't know if you remember me." And he looks at her and just says, "I remember when we were champions." And they give each other the biggest hug. And when she was in trouble years later after a political thing using her name was implemented, Cyclops led a team of X-Men to rescue her and the champions because he refused to let his best friend be, bootstrapped by the American government.
That that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So Cyclops has to go back to the past and everything, and so, like, so how long, like, so Champions is then canceled at some point then, so
It
what
got canceled a couple of times, actually.
okay, so what happens after Champions then?
Well, it's like, you know, Champions went on, they expanded their team roster and all that stuff, and
Mhm.
eventually it got canceled because it just, I guess, wasn't doing well in the sales. And this was where it got into a weird point because before, we kind of skipped a part where before the Champions, Kamala was actually part of the Avengers. She became an official Avenger for a while,
A
along
proper
with,
Avenger?
yep, along
Oh,
with Miles and Nova. They were part of the Avengers during this, like, it was almost like the Avengers equivalent of Justice League Unlimited,
okay.
where the original 7 decided that they were going to expand it and include a lot more heroes. Kamala was part of that team, but she didn't like the way that the adult heroes handled situations, which led to her creating the champions.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, because she was just like, the adults did not view things from a more aware situation, woke, if we're going to call it.
Yeah, well, that's because after a certain point, it's very difficult for you to not get stuck in your own
Yeah, because
ways.
she felt like that they were making the same choices that just kept perpetuating bad situations for people. And the Champions was created to fight against that. But then eventually, like I say, the Champion series got canceled for not selling enough issues, which again sucks. It was a really good series, and I recommend anybody find the trades or the old issues, try to get those. But she kind of like didn't really have a purpose. She had a solo series, thankfully. After the Champion, she didn't have like that greater narrative of fighting for change like they were doing in the Champion series. She got a bit more into her like family heritage, got some costume changes and fun like that. And then eventually, for reasons that still feel random, she became a supporting character in the Spider-Man series.
I
So,
mean, Queens and Jersey City are not close.
I mean, but it's close enough.
As compared to what?
LA to San Francisco,
I mean, are the West Coast Avengers going back and forth between LA and San Francisco as much?
West Coast.
Or you're saying, like, like it's like LA to San Francisco is much further apart
Right,
than
but
like
it's like,
Jersey City to Queens.
yeah, I mean, it's like, it's still doable.
It's doable. It's
Yeah.
just I'm just going to point
But
out that in New York City, if you are living in one borough and your partner is in another borough, that's considered a
well, to
long
be fair,
distance
Spider-Man's
relationship.
working the entire city, but Kamala ended up getting an internship with, was it Osborn?
Oscar?
Oscorp was born. And, she just kind of became a sort of supporting character in his book, which honestly felt kind of disrespectful because she is not a supporting character. She is a lead.
I mean, she had her own series and everything.
Respect Kamala. And she eventually during one of Spider-Man storylines, she needed to save Mary Jane from a threat. And as I mentioned before, Kamala is able to shapeshift into people, and she basically sacrificed herself posing as Mary Jane. The entire story is a real complicated mess. Kamala ended up getting killed and dying in Spider-Man's arms.
Okay.
So R.I.P. Kamala for about a week.
I'm here for that, but does Spider-Man and Mary Jane actually are they just friends at this point? Like,
Yeah, the Spider-Man Mary Jane thing was a complicated mess involving alternate dimension, her marrying somebody else and having some weird kids that weren't really her kids.
okay, that I'm just like,
Yeah, no, it's like that entire thing would be an entire episode in itself. But let's just say,
there's not a lot of my friends' exes that I would go and let myself get killed for, but if they are like,
she's still following the downfall of my ex-boyfriend.
hey,
Am I wrong?
my job as the best friend is to hold the grudges so that he can be the good person.
Keep in mind, my ex-boyfriend and I are on good terms, and we have, we are friends now.
It's much easier to be friends with people if you have somebody else holding the grudge for you. Your hands are free. Anyway.
Yeah, so anyways, Kamala Khan, dead for a week.
Unacceptable.
Yeah, so here's a funny story about Kamala. When she was being created, initially, G. Willow Wilson had intended for her to be a mutant. But again, Marvel did not really want mutants. They had a thing about no new mutant characters.
Oh, okay.
Mutants
So
were allowed to die, but they were doing everything they could to limit new mutant characters because any mutants would be under the X-Men umbrella, not under Marvel's umbrella.
Marvel felt like they were doing their most Scarlet Witch
and
kind
that
of
meant
vibe.
Disney didn't own them, Fox owned them. And so they decided to make her an Inhuman and tie her into the Inhuman push at the time.
Yeah.
So around the same time, Miss Marvel TV series came out. Oh, okay. So around this time, the Miss Marvel TV series had come out, and they did not really want to use the Inhumans after the failure of that Inhumans TV series we've mentioned before.
Yeah, I think it's because Medusa's hair looked absolutely insane.
Well, it's also the fact that they depowered every single character in the first episode.
What is the point of having powered characters with no powers?
Exactly. They shaved Medusa's head in the first episode. But anyways, back to Kamala. So during this, they did not really define what she was. We made the assumption that her bangle was the source of her power.
The negabands or whatever?
Yeah. The negabands were a thing that were actually used by the very first Captain Marvel, and it kind of allowed him to switch places with another character called Rick. Oh god, what's his name?
I do not know Rick's name. I'm so sorry.
There's a character called Rick, and I'm blanking.
So wait,
and it would allow them to switch places.
But this kind of bangle is the reason that, like, in the Marvels movie, every time they would use their powers, they would keep
Exactly.
swapping.
Because Rick and Captain Marvel would switch, and suddenly Rick would become Captain Marvel and stuff like that. So that was the tie-in in the movies, and we're going to completely different tangents here. But anyways,
The bangles matter.
the series of Miss Marvel ended with her best friend saying that he'd looked at her DNA and found that basically she had a mutation.
Da-na-na-na-na-na.
And if you listen to that episode, you actually hear the X-Men sting. And it was revealed that Kamala Khan, in terms of the MCU, was the first official mutant.
If you were not paying attention to the fandom, everybody was going up for this at this point. One, because the reintroduction of mutants and everything like that is very exciting.
Especially considering the fact that they were not allowed to be part of the MCU during the entire course of the series.
And honestly, that's the reason that we have Wolverine and Deadpool, so... I guess Deadpool and Wolverine.
Uh-huh.
So...
Yeah, and it's so Miss Marvel is a mutant, according to the MCU, and...
Well, she's a hybrid, technically, isn't she?
I mean, yes, but...
I guess MCU, her is just straight mutant, and then...
Well, I mean, it's she's still kind of a hybrid, but just not with an Inhuman. But meanwhile...
Oh, that's true,
yeah.
but she's got, some outer space family.
Yeah, but meanwhile, in the comics, they decided it's time for corporate synergy. We love corporate synergy, don't we? And they decided that, well, Miss Marvel had just died. And at this time was also the Krakoa era, which, as we've spoken before, had mutants allowed the ability to resurrect.
Yeah, with that, you get the group of 5.
So Cyclops and Emma Frost decided Miss Marvel dying? Unacceptable. Especially because Cerebro had detected that she had potential mutant powers.
Hmm.
So it is revealed that Miss Marvel was both a mutant and an Inhuman, but the reason why her Inhuman powers manifested was because Terrige's mist hit her before her mutant powers could manifest. This allowed her to be put into the resurrection protocols of Krakoa, and she was brought back and informed by her best friend and by Emma Frost that she was in fact a mutant. Interestingly enough, though, her mutant powers had not manifested. She was still only exhibiting her Inhuman powers, which were the embiggening abilities.
Doesn't that usually kick in with like puberty and such?
It does, but not everybody manifests it at puberty because it's puberty, but also you have to have a high stress situation that will induce the power. Her high stress situation got overridden by the Inhuman powers.
That makes sense.
So she was officially a mutant according to the Marvel universe, and unfortunately her resurrection happened on the same day as the fall of Krakoa and the attack on mutants, and basically Kamala got, what's the word, recruited, for it, lack of a better word, strong-armed into being an X-Man at this point.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And this is also around the time that she's starting college. So she is starting college. She is trying to, have a normal college experience while also working for the Mutant Underground during the Orcus attack on mutant kind.
The freshman 15 is much easier to work off if you are busy battling,
Yep. And so she's trying to, she's officially part of the X-Men, which there's a lot of discussion on whether or not that was a good idea for her, because Kamala has always been associated with Captain Marvel. She has always been associated with the Avengers. She has never had any connections to the X-Men aside from her friendship with Cyclops.
Yeah.
But suddenly now, her entire life is focused around the X-Men story and the X-Men narrative.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, throughout this period, she still does not manifest her mutant powers. It's not until a few years, like a year or two later, that she gets caught up in a weird time-traveling shenanigans situation where she ends up being inserted into the lives of the X-Men at different points in the timeline.
Okay, well,
So she ends up showing up with the all-new X-Men team, and she is there during the Dark Phoenix saga and stuff like that. And she basically becomes an important part in their lives to some extent. She kind of helps talk Jean Grey down from depression after the whole Dark Phoenix incident and things like that.
she's starting to feel a little bit Mary Sue at this point.
Kind of, yeah. A little bit the way they were writing her in the storyline. And she also ended up being sent to the Age of Apocalypse timeline, where she ends up being mentored by the Age of Apocalypse version of Rogue.
Oh my god.
And it's during this thing that her powers fully manifest, and they turn out to be the same powers that she had in the MCU TV show, which were these hard light creation powers. But since she's still an Inhuman, it's kind of like a dual thing. So she embiggens herself, but she's also got like this hard light armor
Which is
situation.
actually very cool. Like, you
Yeah.
saw in the show that she would like sit there and like stretch really far, or she would like sit there and make the hard light to like use as stepping stones or as a shield.
Yeah, so they're kind of like having their cake and eating it too.
I mean, someone's got to do it.
Yeah. And she has largely been tied into the X-Men ever since. She was part of the NYX series, which followed a handful of college-age mutants as they were just trying to create a life for themselves in New York post-Krakoa. So it was her, one of the Stepford Cuckoos, Prodigy, and like Anole, and, she's trying to be part of the mutant community while still living her normal life, and it's a good series. It's, enjoyable, but it's still, a lot of fans really find it weird that she is so tied into the X-Men now,
Yeah.
to the point where it's like she barely interacts with Captain Marvel these days.
Oh, wait, no, that's not okay. I mean, I guess sometimes you get really busy with work and you don't really have time to like fan the way
Yeah.
that you want to.
But it's still like, it's very weird that they've put so much focus on her being a mutant now, to the detriment of her relationship with Carol and, the other, Avengers and Champions.
I will say that there's a certain amount of earnestness that wearing off because she is like, in college now. And so the like excitement that you have as a teenager in high school trying to figure stuff out versus like, being a very early, like, like teenager in college or early 20s in college is a slightly different vibe.
True, but it's still like, you don't need her to still be the fangirl she was before.
Yeah.
But it's one of those where it's like, it just kind of feels like she's being forced into a role that just was never designed for her. Because, yes, the creator had intended her to be a mutant before, but she wasn't.
So,
And so now she's a mutant, and now it's like, oh, you're a mutant? Well, you have to be an X-Man now. So it's like, her being a mutant is fine. It's just the fact that she's having to be part of the X-Men.
well,
That's weird.
I think they don't know what to do with Ronin mutants, though.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate thing because NYX has been canceled. There's nothing really consistent with Kamala going on right now, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And, fans are hoping for a new solo series, or they're hoping for her to be part of another Avengers team.
I definitely need her to be part of an
Yeah,
Avengers
but
team.
it looks like if she's going to appear again, it's probably going to be part of the X-Men.
That's
Which, it's like, more Kamala, great, I'm down for it. But when she's part of the X-Men, she's going to be lost in the ensemble.
yeah.
And she is a star. She deserves to be front and center. Because
I
the Avengers, well, with the Avengers, they are a team. And yeah, sometimes somebody's focus of that storyline, but they're also all individual heroes. Majority of them have their own solo books and stuff like that.
And there's some respect put on all of their names, too.
Yeah. But the X-Men are a family. They're a team. They are a, unit. So yeah, you might have Wolverine having his own solo series, but the majority of the other team are part of a team book. They are not always getting their solo series.
Also, even though there's a bit of a ship of Theseus thing happening with the X-Men, to a certain extent, the team has maintained a lot of the same membership since, like, the 60s, so it's not really...
Yeah, the X-Men have not really been allowed to switch it up too much.
So, all right, well, why don't we sit there and take a quick break, argue about whether or not the X-Men should be included more, and we'll be back to Up Your Nerd Cred. Welcome back to our thrilling conclusion. So, as we're wrapping up this discussion of the Captain and the Miss Marvels, I think it's worth, like, kind of thinking about, again, like, kind of the themes that we have seen with... So we talked about the themes that we saw with Carol last week. So the themes that we have with Monica, it sounds to me like we have a lot of just, like, there's a lot of double standards and intersectionality issues that Monica had to deal with that, to a certain extent, Carol never would. And having Monica kind of go through some of the stuff that she's dealing with, like, the moniker and everything as Miss Marvel, or as Captain Marvel,
Yeah,
was
because
a lot.
the fact that she, basically lost the moniker due to, editorial mandates of giving it to somebody else because she wasn't popular enough. The fact that she, did not get the kind of, like, mainstream attention that Carol has gotten. It's stuff that she's had to deal with, but she's got a loyal fan base. That's the most important thing, because when she was announced for WandaVision, people online were so happy about this. They were so happy to have this character that they grew up with, that they loved, or who they've read it recently in comics.
Also, I will say that she did look good during the dance scene in the Marvels, even if her character was very, like, stompy about it. So
Yeah.
I really respect that. And
Yeah,
then
I always appreciate a good musical number, which we got to appreciate with the Marvels movie. It's like, so many people are like, oh, it's a terrible movie. It's one of the worst movies. I'm like, I enjoyed it. I love the relationship between the three girls. I love the musical planet that they had to deal with.
the bilingual prince
Exactly.
who is able to speak by talking instead of
Yeah.
singing.
Yeah, because
I think there was just, like, a couple of editing choices that they could have made if they'd moved a couple of scenes around. I think it would have been a stronger film, but overall,
this is one of those stories where it's like, it's something that people are always like, comic movies have to be serious. It's like, one of the things that made comics survive as long as they did was the fact they could be silly sometimes.
yeah.
And I mean, the Silver Age of DC, if you look at those stories, it was like Superman who shoots mini Superman out of his fingertips with rainbow lasers. Batman who decides he needs to change his costume a different color every single day. It's like,
Where's Catwoman, though?
well, at that time,
Anyway.
enjoying downtime because she was not allowed to exist.
Yeah, no, she was relaxing, living her best life.
Yeah.
That's fair.
But yeah, it's like the Marvels movie I enjoyed it. I get that some people were like hating on it because Brie Larson and stuff like that, but
Thor: The Dark World exists, as does Iron Man 3. We've talked about my feelings about Iron Man 3.
it's like she got some great stuff, and the fact that Monica is still out there and currently existing in the X-Men universe.
I mean,
Like
yeah.
at the end of the Marvels, she sacrificed herself to close that rift and ended up hanging out with Hank McCoy and
Binary.
her mother. So I'm excited to see what they do next with her. And then meanwhile, we've got Kamala, who is,
I need to see more Kamala, and I'm desperate for, like, this Young Avengers series before they get too old.
Or
and
Champions, whatever they're going to call it now.
Whichever one, I don't care. I just want to do it before they get to a point where it's not really champions so much as, like, eat your oatmeal, champ.
Yep. And, with her, a lot of her themes are, I would say, optimism.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's like she's this person who just always believes that things are going to work out, that there is hope for the future.
And this lady is, like, as a member of a community that has, like, actively gone through it, to be able to have that kind of optimism is, honestly, it's everything.
And the best part is, like, she finds that optimism through her fandom. She is the key example of a positive fan, of somebody who, like, they take the best things from from the stuff that they love.
If you like something, go ahead and like it. If you love something, go ahead and love it. Do it boldly. Have fun with it. Like,
and she's not a toxic fan. She's not like saying, "Oh, well, you don't understand this." She is excited to share her love of these things. I mean, she goes up to Wolverine and tells him about this fanfic he wrote about or him and Storm.
You could not pull that out of me with Wild Horses.
Yeah, so, Kamala is that hope for the future that you just really, really want kids to have, especially fans. Because you don't want to be like Star Wars fans.
Oh, you mean the ones who got really mad at the fact that a girl existed?
Exactly.
Or a black guy existed?
Yeah, it's like, don't be a Star Wars fan, be a Miss Marvel fan. Yeah. It's like, have just the view that positivity and hope for the better.
As we're putting stuff on your calendar, here's what it is that we should look at for this week.
All right. Guardian, who is also known as Weapon Alpha and Vindicator, made his debut in Uncanny X-Men 109 by Chris Claremont and John Byrne, and this was on November 15th, 1977.
So November 16th is the birthday of Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow. So he is a Scorpio if you're trying to run his chart.
And then with the bold words emboldened on the cover, this issue, Everyone Dies. Days of Future Past concluded in X-Men 142 by Chris Claremont and John Byrne.
And in 1968, Thor and the Silver Surfer actually met for the first time in Silver Surfer #4 by Stan Lee and John Buscema.
I'm just thinking about the Silver Surfer and Thor meeting. I can't imagine they have a lot to talk about.
I mean, they're not really known for being the chattiest members of the team.
Well, Thor is.
Thor is. Okay, so Norrin Rad is not really known for being aggressively chatty.
No.
But then again...
Can you get the Silver Surfer drunk on Asgardian ale?
We are not trying to get the Silver Surfer drunk on Asgardian ale because he is a cosmic being. He's got the power cosmic.
I want to get him drunk.
Yes, but he's got the power cosmic, so I don't know if Asgardian ale is going to be strong enough.
Fair enough.
Then again, Loki could probably do it.
Yes.
I mean, enchant the ale, I guess, maybe.
Yeah, but can you enchant it for cosmic beings?
I mean, they were able to enchant, what's that doggy at the end of the universe, at the end of time? Afaroth? The two Lokis were able to enchant it at the same time, so, you never know. All right. So, well, I will say that, listeners, we have come to the end of our episode. I know! You're devastated. How is it possible that it is over so soon? Our faces together. When will you see it again? I mean, you'll see it again if you, wait until next week whenever we present our next issue, our next episode.
Yeah, but, it's sitting down on the same couch. It's going to be a bit more...
Yeah, it takes work. New York to LA is not close.
No, it does not.
So...
Well, nerd cred takes time to build.
But if you can actually sit there and maintain the optimism to get through building the nerd cred, you're going to have a good time with it. So...
And now it's time to mention that we are on Instagram, we're on Apple, Spotify, and any other place you get your podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
And you can find us on Up Your Nerd Cred pod on Instagram.
If you're looking for me across platforms, I'm at Kira C. Davis.
And I am AM Diaz _art, but,
Yeah, make sure you send him, the good art. It's in his name, AMDS _art. And also, please make sure you get your friends to also like and subscribe to the pod, and your family, and, your coworkers that you trust not to be weird about listening to the same podcast as you.
And good night, everybody.
ba 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 ba.